Alright, let me show you how I'm working on another commission. This one's for decorating the oldest herbal shop here in Barcelona. By the way, that's me in the photo, holding the painting before restoration. For this piece, we're going with muted natural colors and, of course, a herbal theme. Now I know what some of you longtime viewers are thinking. Alex, you used to paint landscapes. Why the sudden still life? Well, here's the thing. It all comes down to size. Landscapes feel totally fine on a small panel, but a still life, not so much. See, we're used to spotting little houses and trees the size of a fingernail, but fruits? We expect those to look life-sized, like something you'd hold in your hand or set on the table. That's why artists usually paint fruit, flowers, and everyday objects close to their actual size, maybe give or take 20%. The panel I'm using here is probably the smallest I'd ever recommend for a still life, but hey, this is a commission, so the measurements were set in stone from the start. And speaking of panels, you can totally get yourself a stack of these too. They're basically an unlimited source of painting surfaces. I even put up a video showing how to make them. It's super simple, go check it out. Right now I'm working on the shadows, laying down the darkest areas of the painting. You'll notice there's more umber here than green, and that terracotta underpainting is giving us just the right tone. By the way, I have no idea why I squeezed cadmium red onto the palette. Pretty sure I am not going to use it in this session of our little art therapy, probably just habit. Anyway, at this stage we're blocking in the main color masses, and slowly the whole scene will start to take shape. Keep an eye on the changes. I am going to skip over the most obvious steps, but if anything feels unclear, drop a question here or over on Facebook, the link's down below. Honestly, I feel a bit strange doing this kind of work right now. The whole world seems to be losing its mind over AI, and here we are doing something that has barely changed in a few hundred years. Not that I feel like some ancient count locked away in a castle in Romania, name of Vladimir, but when I paint, I get this sense of grounding, of stability, like the whole world sprinted past in a panic and I just stayed here, calmly pushing paint around. Maybe that's what being present feels like, or life itself. Do you ever get that feeling when you're creating something? And making content like this is not exactly easy. Algorithms love the flashy, trashy, clickbaity stuff. I just could not bring myself to do that, so I guess we're more like a little rebel crew, keeping traditional art alive. But here's the cool part. It really does something to your brain. Art therapy literally helps your mind heal, reset, and come back into balance. It's kind of amazing. You're just sitting there, dipping your brush, moving some paint around on the panel, and then you look into actual research. And boom! Turns out this stuff works almost like medicine. No joke. Even the simplest things, doodling, coloring, just playing with shapes, they activate your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain tied to motivation and pleasure. Like there was this study at Drexel University where participants were hooked up to sensors, and as soon as they started doing any kind of visual art, their reward system lit up. Their brains were basically going, hey, I like this. And it wasn't just experienced artists. It worked for everyone, regardless of skill level. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. If you do this regularly, painting, drawing, sculpting, anything visual, your brain actually starts working differently. There's this thing called the default mode network. It switches on when we're not focused on a task, like when we're daydreaming or reflecting on life. And studies show that regular visual creativity strengthens that network. That means better stress resilience, more emotional regulation, stronger sense of self. There's even a study where adults painted weekly for 10 weeks, and researchers found actual improvements in those brain connections. Not just I feel better, their brains became more connected and stable. And get this, just 45 minutes of creative activity is enough to lower cortisol levels. That's your stress hormone. Even total beginners saw the effect. So the whole I'm not an artist thing? Yeah, your brain doesn't care. It's not looking at your lemon and judging the composition. It just wants you to engage. Now, art therapy isn't just a cute side hobby, it's used seriously. In PTSD, in stroke recovery, and even with elderly patients who have cognitive decline. And it works not because it opens your chakras, but because it gives people a non-verbal way to express emotion, process trauma, and just reconnect with their body. And here's something I find really beautiful. Most of the time, we're painting things that feel familiar. A landscape, a house. Or like today, a little spice mortar and some herbal stems. Tangible objects, real scale. That's not just aesthetic, it's therapeutic. The brain recalibrates. This is the size of the world. I can hold it, I can see it. That's why I always say, don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for the big idea. Just start. Open your paint. Set a timer for 30 minutes. And go. Even if you don't finish anything, you're still giving your brain something it desperately needs. Here are a few things that help me, and that are backed by actual research, by the way. A few ground rules for DIY art therapy. Limit your palette and tools. Decision overload kills the flow. Pick 2-3 colors and 1 or 2 tools. That's it. Set a timer for 25-45 minutes. Take 60 seconds to breathe before you start. And when you're done, jot down one sentence. How do I feel right now? Work in big shapes, not details. Think of it as slow motion meditation with your hands. Big areas, medium, small. No judgment for the first 10 minutes. Your brain needs time to switch into process mode. Save the "is it good" for later. Consistency beats inspiration. 3-4 times a week gives better results for stress and mood than random art binges. Where it's used clinically, PTSD and depression. In randomized trials with veterans, adding one-on-one art therapy to standard cognitive processing therapy reduced PTSD and depressive symptoms more than therapy alone. It works because some things can't be processed in words. Art gives them a way out. Stroke rehab. Studies show that combining art therapy with physical therapy improves recovery, less depression, better quality of life, even functional gains. Cognitive disorders and dementia. For elderly patients, visual art programs reduce behavioral symptoms and sometimes improve memory and attention. One study showed cognitive gains after just 8 weeks of structured art sessions. Of course, results depend on the individual, but the trend is promising. Mental health in general. The UK's National Institute for Health Research, NIHR, reviewed a bunch of randomized trials and found real improvements in anxiety, depression, and overall well-being, especially in group art therapy. And updated meta-analyses support that too, especially for older adults. So yeah, while the world is obsessed with AI, we're here, doing the same thing humans have done for centuries. By the way, sometimes you ask me, do I use thinner or oil? I use both, but let me share a little cocktail I swear by. You'll need linseed oil, refined or boiled, plus some Damar varnish and turpentine. Mix it all until it's nice and smooth, and you're ready to paint. Back in the academy, we used to call it the Trinity. There are so many little details that can make or break your experience. The right brushes, good paint, the right mediums to mix or thin it, proper canvas material, and even something as basic as how you hold the brush or where you stand while painting. Some of these things I learned in art school. Some I picked up from other painters, some came with time. But the one thing I know for sure, never stick to just one teacher. Learn from many and eventually you'll find your own voice. If you're curious, I put together a painting course. It's for beginners, but also for anyone who wants to ground their practice in real technique. It costs about as much as filling up your car, but way less depressing. You pay once and get access for as long as you need. Links in the description. As you can see, the first layer is now dry and I'm applying a Retouch varnish. What it does is revive the true colors of the paint, especially in the areas where the surface absorbed a bit too much oil and things started to look dull, kind of matte and cloudy. This is completely normal. It's just part of the process. You can avoid it by adding more oil into your mix, but the trade-off is that drying time increases drastically. Like, instead of a couple days, you're waiting weeks for each layer to dry. So yeah, I'll take the matte spots and just varnish. And the moment you do, it's like the painting comes back to life. The color reappears, the depth returns. It's honestly one of my favorite parts. But this isn't the final step. Once the entire painting is completely dry, we'll apply a proper final varnish to seal the work and lock in the richness for good. But for now, it's back to the small brush, fresh layers, and a lot of slow, detailed work. The kind where you focus on one corner of the painting for 30 minutes straight, and you just breathe. You're not really thinking anymore. Your body just does it. There's something kind of trance-like about it. You repeat the same motion, watch the stroke go down, adjust slightly, and again. And slowly everything else sort of fades out. The noise, the plans, the news, the shoulds, and it's just this. It's not about control. In fact, the more you try to control it, the worse it goes. It's about showing up, being present, and trusting the process. And at this point, I often catch myself wondering something. Why do we love watching other people work? It's funny, right? There's something oddly satisfying about just watching someone paint, or fix a chair, or bake something, or restore a rusty knife. You're not doing anything, but your brain is hooked. There's actually a reason for that. And it's not just the ASMR or the background music. It has to do with something called mirror neurons. These are neurons in our brains that fire not only when we do something, but when we watch someone else do it, especially when it's something precise, intentional, and physical. So when you're watching this, me brushing in highlights or building up texture, part of your brain is imagining doing it too. You're almost participating. It creates this weird, quiet connection between the person doing the work and the person watching it. And maybe that's why it feels calming. Maybe that's why you're still here. The more I think about it, the more I realize we're living in a world that's been optimized to death. Everything is designed to be fast, efficient, scalable. Factories, software, customer service, even friendships sometimes. They're all expected to run like clockwork, quicker, smoother, cleaner. And sure, I get it. Automation has done a lot of good. I'm not against progress. But there's a downside too. We've gradually lost contact with things that were made slowly, with care, with someone's hands. These days, it's actually rare to touch something that didn't come out of a mold or an algorithm. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you held an object that still had the fingerprint of the person who made it? Maybe a hand-carved spoon, a mug with a glazed drip, a painting with visible brushstrokes, not digital noise. You don't see that in mass-produced life. And those handmade things, they're never perfect. The glaze might crack. The surface might not be flat. Maybe the wood creaks a little, or the paint lifted oddly in one spot. And yet, those flaws, they speak. They tell you a story. You can feel that it came from a person, not a machine. And for some reason that moves us, because I think deep down, we're kind of starved for imperfection, for texture, for signs of real effort. We're so used to seeing everything polished and compressed, content, products, people, that we start believing that smoothness equals quality, but it doesn't. Smooth is just easy to consume. That doesn't mean it's true, that doesn't mean it's alive. You know what's funny? Sometimes I paint something and a little wobble shows up in the brushstroke. Old me would have tried to fix it. But now, I usually leave it, because I know that years from now, that little wobble might be the one human thing that makes someone stop and look a second time. We've forgotten that effort, real, slow, deliberate effort, is part of what gives something its value. It's not a flaw to be airbrushed out. It's the very evidence of intention. Sometimes I imagine, what if paintings were made the way modern content is made? You'd probably get AI that picks the trending colors, generates a composition in 3 seconds, applies a texture pack, and boom, ready to go viral. Would it be technically perfect? Maybe. But would it matter to anyone? Would you stand in front of it and feel anything? That's the difference. Handmade things carry time inside them. And time, real time, not timestamp on a post time, is a form of attention. It says, I was here, I stayed, I gave this thing my focus, my breath, my energy. And that's what makes it valuable. Not the price, not the likes, but the fact that it required presence. Which honestly is something we rarely give to anything these days. So when I work slowly, or when you see a scene in a painting that clearly took hours, don't think, oh, that's a lot of work. Think, this is what it looks like when a human being stays with something long enough to let it become real. Because in the end, maybe that's the only antidote we have to all the noise. To keep making slow, imperfect human things, and to let them stand unapologetically in a world that keeps rushing past. And look, if you're still here, if you're watching this, there's a pretty good chance you want to slow down. Maybe not all the time, but enough to know there's something valuable here. And the truth is, you can absolutely do this too. You don't need to have years of training or the perfect studio setup or expensive materials. You don't even need to have talent, whatever that means. You just need a little space, a little time, and the willingness to not rush it. Because here's the thing, your hands already know more than you think. Your eyes are more sensitive than you give them credit for. And your brain, believe it or not, wants something slow and steady to hold on to. So when you sit down to make something, whether it's painting, carving, gardening, even cooking slowly, you're not proving anything. You're not performing. You're just spending time with your own attention. And maybe that's what art really is, not beauty, not skill, but time spent deliberately. And you know what? People often assume slow means boring. Like if something doesn't grab your attention in 5 seconds, it's not worth your time. But maybe we've just been trained to need everything fast, loud, clickable. We've become allergic to stillness. But stillness isn't silence. It's the space where something real starts to grow. Some of the most powerful experiences I've had as a viewer or as a maker were also the quietest. A long, uncut shot in a film, the sound of someone sharpening a pencil, a section of canvas where the light shifts just slightly from warm to cool. Those moments don't fight for your attention, they invite it, and you have to meet them halfway. And maybe that's the point.